In today's episode of Ask Jack D, we're talking about something which I think still doesn't get spoken about enough, which is what do we do when we fail? What we need to realize is that when we step outside the traditional path and pursue a non-traditional entrepreneurial path where innovation and risk-taking is part and parcel with the journey, failure is inevitable and we need to approach it as such.
28 and I'm trying to shape history, pulling from the sky for some strength to take with me, line up the stars, fly away quickly and push the world forward like a tidal wave hit me. I ride the wave swiftly, I fear no man, check my titles mate quickly, came from the sky with the light of day in me.
Hello, welcome back to this episode of Ask Jack D. For those of you listening to this on the podcast, welcome back to you too. For those of you that are yet to download the podcast, do that, hashtag Ask Jack D on iTunes. We are loving...
And SoundCloud for Android users.
SoundCloud for Android users.
Not everyone has iPhones. We get asked that a lot. I'm just letting them know.
When I throw to you, you don't talk. When I decide I'm going to do the intro myself and not include you at your request, you pipe up and you do talk. What is it? What am I dealing with here, Shorty? Oh, shit. Alrighty.
Okay, question
Yeah,
time.
let's do that.
So this one comes from John Hosking. We actually answered this recently on a Facebook Live episode. So he says, hey mate, just failed a startup, finding it hard to get back up on the horse. It's tough. What tips would you suggest to get the mind right again?
John, this was a legendary question on a recent live episode, so thank you for asking it. And we had, this kind of formed the basis for the whole conversation of that live episode, didn't it? Because questions came from, and we, for half an hour, which is how long the live episodes go for, we discussed failure, right? With 2.1 thousand, and I'm not, it's probably 3,000 now. Well, it's over 3 now, but live on the night, it's about a bit over 2,000 entrepreneurs. We discussed failure, which is, you know, a lot of people say this, is something that we don't talk about enough. And a lot of people say that because it's true, right? Like there are now conferences and stuff. I don't know if there's any in Australia, but there's like FailCon and there's conferences where people talk about their failures, which is really cool. But it's still, you know, right at the sort of crest of the wave. I'd be very interested to see more of it. The reason why it's such a important conversation to have, because it is an inevitable, and I don't use that word lightly, inevitable part of any entrepreneurial journey. You know, a lot of what I've spoken to you guys about is how I've studied, you know, the greats of history and people that have changed the course of history forever, be it an Einstein or a Mandela or an Oprah Winfrey or whatever it might be. Up until about a year ago, one of the things, although I'd spent my entire life studying success, it came to me that I actually hadn't spent a lot of time studying failure. And if you look at a lot of the great empires, a lot of the great empires throughout time, the only thing that they have in common is that they all fell, right? And so, and I think Brené Brown says this in one of her books that she wrote recently, which is when you dare boldly enough, often enough, you will fall, right? You will fall. Not you may fall, not you might maybe one day fall. You will fall. If you dare greatly enough, boldly enough, often enough, it will happen. Right, you won't see any great entrepreneur, be it Zuckerberg, who's obviously had incredible success, accelerated success at a very young age, Jobs, Musk, J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, who's credited with doing more for childhood literacy than any other person in history. Study any of these people. Study Elon Musk in 2008, right? You won't find any person that's ever done anything worthwhile. And that's a whole bunch of generalism and absolutes. Any person that's ever done anything worthwhile, right, that hasn't had spectacular, public, fall-on-your-face failures right throughout their career. What I think... And this was interesting with John, right? On the live episode, I said, let's talk about it, because with failure, I think a large part of the fear of failure is around the shame that we feel thinking that other people will judge the failure. Often, I think we back ourselves to be able to navigate through the failure, but the bit that stings is what will people think of us? What will it mean in terms of how will it look? How will it be perceived? And so when that came up on the live episode, I will get some screenshots of this and bring them up on the screen. I said to the audience, knowing what John's just shared with us, John said he had a startup, it failed before Christmas, he'd recently raised an investment round, and then the company had to shut down pre-Christmas. Now, I'm not sure the details of the failure, but I said to the audience, what do you think of John as a result of this failure? And what do you think of the failure? You know, and I knew that what would not come up was John wasn't good enough, John mustn't have worked hard, John isn't smart enough, John's not cut out. I don't think there was one comment, not one comment, and there's hundreds of comments on this post, not one comment said that. It was, John, I applaud you for trying, and given what you've said, because it was an ongoing conversation, I back you to get up and start again, right? It was, John, you've obviously had the courage not only to try, but to fail, and then to share it and talk about it. Everybody was incredibly encouraging of John and what he had been through. And so recognizing that failure is inevitable, recognizing that when you strive boldly enough, often enough, you will fall, and recognizing that every great entrepreneur or person of any endeavor who's ever tried to do anything worthwhile has failed spectacularly and publicly over and over and over again. It would be very easy to develop a theory that would suggest those who do great things in life, those who are prepared to dare greatly because they back themselves to have the emotional courage and fortitude to navigate through any failure, regardless of how public or how shameful they might actually consider it to be before it happens, right? Guys, this happens, right? Like in 2014, Branson lost a spaceship, a Virgin Galactic spaceship over the Mojave Desert. It like disintegrated mid-flight, right? So there's two test pilots and one of them lost their life. Like, and this is Branson. At the time, he would have been 64, and the whole world's media was crucifying him for weeks because what happens when there's an aviation accident is the NTSB, the National Transport and Safety Bureau, has to run a process to investigate what happened. And while the NTSB are running their process, any person or company that's a party to the investigation cannot talk about or speculate what happened until the NTSB release their findings. And so and that usually takes sort of 10 days, a couple of weeks, whatever it might be. And so between the time of the crash and the time that NTSB released their findings, the entire world media was crucifying Branson. Like Branson should stick to mobile phones. Branson not cut out for space travel. Branson stop the killing, right? Like in UK, in Europe, in the States, in Australia, in Asia, everywhere. You can Google it, like Virgin Galactic spaceship crash. Just Google it and look at the world media around October 2014. He was getting fucking crucified, and because of this NTSB, regulation stuff, he couldn't defend himself, even though they knew it wasn't a technical fault. It was human error that caused the crash, which doesn't make it any better. It's still a tragic thing to happen, and they've now put in place measures to ensure that the human error can't occur again. But there's a degree of that being another side of the story that couldn't have been brought up while he's getting crucified by world media, right, in just about every continent across the planet. So, if you put yourself in Branson's shoes, you've got an empire that's, doing between $6 and $8 billion a year in revenue. I think he employs about, across the vast number of businesses, probably 40 or 50,000 people. And it's not like a business has failed. Someone's just lost their life, right? And you've got to go meet their family. And you've got to meet and talk to the colleagues, and you've got to talk to everybody that works for you, the 40 or 50,000 people, to say this is what happened and this is where we're going, and I think this is why it's still worth to keep going if you do think it's worth keeping going. Right? Like, and the world's looking at you and crucifying you, right? So all of that together, when you look at examples like that, Branson 2014, look at Musk 2008, look at Mandela. He spent 30 years in jail, right? Like, when you look at the adversity of some of the people that we truly respect and admire, it puts our challenges and our failures into perspective. And it also helps remind you that when you dare greatly enough, boldly enough, often enough, you will fall. And that's fine. It's a good app. See you guys next time.